let me introduce you to a wonderful process which is an ink resist way of painting, or it's called gouache wash off. And first you paint your image in water soluble gouache, and at this point it looks a bit like painting by numbers, but don't worry, it's going to transform into an amazing image that looks a bit like a woodcut print or maybe a lino print. Then comes the super scary bit. You coat your entire painting in Indian ink. It has to be waterproof because once it's dry, we're going to wash the entire painting under a tap. The water-soluble gouache will wash away, or some of it will. It'll leave a stain behind and it'll take the excess ink away with it, and we will find our beautiful and intriguing image. If you'd like to learn more about this technique after watching the film, I have a full step-by-step course at www.lizchattertonstudio.co.uk. Halloween has become rather a scary event. Lots of fun, but it's all emphasis on ghosts and ghouls. And we all forget that it was the night before All Hallows Day when we would remember people who had died. In lots of Latin America, the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, is actually a celebration of those who've gone. And I'm inspired by the beautiful sugar skulls that you get in Mexico to do this painting. This is a napkin I picked up in a Mexican restaurant, which was far too beautiful to be used. So I'm going to use a very strange technique. It's an ink resist technique where we use gouache to protect the paper, put ink over the top and then wash it all under a tap to reveal the final image. Sounds bananas, but it's going to work, I'm sure. I'm going to use this painting as a celebration, thinking about a couple of people in particular who've died in the past couple of years, but to celebrate their life. So I have actually lit a little candle, and that's going to keep me company. This technique is incredibly tough on your paper because we are literally going to wash this off underwater. So I would, before you start, just test a little scrap of it. This is still a bit wet actually, underwater, to make sure that it doesn't fall to pieces. And I'm also testing my colours. These are all gouache, to see how much they wash away when I run them under tap and how much of a stain they leave behind. I've got a piece of Bockingford watercolour paper, which I've used for this technique lots, so I know it's going to work. And I've sketched out my skull. As I say, some of it was rather inspired by this napkin, but you can easily find all sorts on the internet. And the principle is, anywhere you paint will be that colour or a tint of it when it's washed away. Anywhere you leave blank will end up black. So if you want somewhere to be white, so I want this skull to be white, I'll need to paint it white, but I think I'll do that last. This is going to be a border that'll be white with coloured dots. All these are going to be coloured. That is my plan. And I love this technique. It's really precise. You have to follow the order, otherwise it simply won't work. But it has quite a level of jeopardy to it, which is what I rather like as well, because at the end you get a great surprise. I'm going to start with this sort of thing in the middle of its forehead, and all these pencil marks will disappear. The skull designs do tend to be symmetrical, so bear that in mind. Now you need to put your gouache on thick enough that the ink will not go through it, but thin enough that you can spread it, and that is a balancing act. What I was saying about the thickness, this orange came out of the tube very, very thick, so I have to add a little water to get it moving and workable. If you don't know what gouache is, and lots of people, and the correct way of pronouncing it is gouache. It is spelt, it looks like it's gouache, and I have to say, I say gouache, I always get told off by somebody. I know how you say it, but I just think it's important for people who maybe have not used it before, they've just seen the word. If I said gouache, they might not actually associate the way it's spelt with the way it sounds. And if it offends you, you better turn off now because I'm going to say it a lot. So gouache is an opaque, water-soluble paint. You must make sure that you are using gouache and not acrylic gouache. First colour that you put down on the paper is the colour that you will end up with. Now, can you see this yellow ochre actually needs a little bit more water in it? It's so thick that the edges are not clean. That's probably all the coloured bits on it, but I need to do its teeth because I want the skull to be white and the teeth to be white with black outlines. If I want it to be white, I can't just leave it white. It needs protecting. So I need to paint it white, and this will be particularly dull for you to watch because white paper, white paint makes for very uninteresting viewing. If you're struggling to see the white, what you can do is add a tiny tint of a colour to it. Maybe add just a little bit of blue or pink or something, just so that you can see where on earth you're going. I'm going to let this dry before I paint the skull white. Let me show you what I'm going to do with this border. I am very fond of dots, but I am going to use a pencil eraser, dip it in my gouache and use it in the border to make dots. Okay, I'm going to carry on with painting the patterns all around the outside now. I think I have most of the colour on. Now I need to paint the skull white, and as a suggestion, it's a good idea just to give yourself some guidelines because it can be very easy to paint the wrong thing. And I have done something a bit silly. I was going to have this all as a white border, but I've done white dots, and white dots on white are not going to show up. Colour them in afterwards. I think that's going to be the best thing for me to do. What you can do, because the first colour that hits the surface is the colour that will be there, I can actually paint straight over this so that I don't get black outlines. You have to make sure this is fully dry. So this is where I'm just going to obliterate all my work except those wiggles that I left. And then I think I've just got to paint the border white. So what we have got is a black border because it's untouched, then the white frame with the coloured dots. This will all be black behind all the circles. The skull will be white with the colours, except for this shape, which will be black. We will have black nose, black eye sockets, black edges to the teeth. That's a black shape there. There's going to be some black rings here. This will be black with white dots, coloured shapes. And I think we are as done as I can be. Now I need to leave this to dry. Then we are going to cover it with black ink and then do the wash off in the hope that it will all work. This is the terrifying bit. You need to cover everything with Indian ink. Make sure your gouache is totally dry. I actually left this overnight. Now there is a chance that the brush marks will show through. I think it's because the sort of edge of your brush mark is wetter than the centre of it. So I would put your brush marks in a meaningful direction. So for example, round the sides, that's all fine. But let me show you what I mean in the middle. So I would do short, multi-directional strokes so that you don't get stripes just if it does show through. Try and touch the paper only once, because the water in the ink will start to reactivate your gouache and smear it if you go backwards and forwards. You're using a nice soft brush, you're not making it swim in the ink, but you do want the ink to be good and black. You can see why that is rather terrifying, because you may have spent several hours doing your painting and now you've just ruined it all. But you haven't. The black ink acts almost like the grout that if you were doing tiling or mosaic and it looks a bit of a mess, and then you put the grout on that fills in all the gaps and it transforms it. Well, this ink will have that effect. The ink needs to dry, and it dries very, very quickly. It'll take 10 minutes. You can use a hairdryer on it if you're feeling impatient. Obviously wash your brush. I like it when the ink's dry because you can still see the ghostly image underneath. And now we need to go for the big reveal. I'm going to move to my kitchen where we've got running water, and I've got a stiff brush to help remove some of that ink. So now comes the fun bit when we wash it all off and hopefully reveal our final image. Oh, I've got it upside down. So what happens is the gouache dissolves and takes away the excess ink, and we start to see what's going on. You'll find some gouache dissolves easier than others. Some disappears a lot, which is why it's a good idea to test your colours before you start. Sometimes it's exactly what you want and sometimes it isn't. And it's all a bit of a surprise. So you can see how that's starting to reveal. And it's a compromise between getting rid of lots of the ink and lots of the colour. If you haven't got running water, you can absolutely do this in a bowl of water. Running water I like because it just keeps taking away the colour, because you don't want the colour to soak back into. Oh, look at its teeth. How nice. So the fun of this technique is that the ink does break through in places and you get some random marks you might not be expecting. If lots of your colour washes away and you're a little disappointed, don't be, because we can always touch it up. So now I'm going to blot that, just because, well, one, it helps it dry quicker, and if there's any extra colour, it stops it moving. Once it's fully dry, you can work out whether you need to touch anything up, whether you need to get rid of any lines. Not those there, do we? Most of them will have disappeared under the ink, so that's fine, but I just didn't particularly like those ones. And I would caution you not to overly touch this up, because the whole point of this technique and why we just didn't paint it in the first place is that we get, you know, these random marks, and everything's a bit of a surprise. Do you remember I went wrong by painting over here with white and I should have left it clear? I am going to touch that up. So I've got some of my ink, nice little pointy brush and hopefully a steady hand. I can just touch that up. No one need ever know. I might just touch that up while we're about it. The question is, do we need to touch up any of the colour? Do you remember I'd done white dots around the outside, and of course white on a white band isn't showing up, so I might touch up a few of those. This turquoise washed off a lot. That was more the Prussian blue, which I like. I don't mind the fact that it's washed off here. I think I want to do something with that. The red has washed off a lot, which I knew it was going to, because that's why I did that little test at the beginning. So I might just touch that up and actually get it to be a bit pinker. If you want to touch up any of the colour, use watercolour rather than gouache, because the gouache is opaque and will sit on that surface and be really obvious, whereas the watercolour is transparent and will just blend in beautifully. I'm going to very carefully touch up these and try and make it look as if they came out the perfect colour to start with. There, that's better. So there is our finished sugar skull. I hope you enjoyed the jeopardy that we have faced together, and see how by using this technique we get these gorgeous random marks, which I think really add to this as a subject matter. If you want to frame it, you could frame it under glass, you could mount it on a wooden panel and wax it. That is up to you. And of course you can use this technique, so ink resist or gouache wash off technique, for many subjects. And just to remind you, if you would like to do a full step-by-step workshop on this, I've got one on a landscape and one on a turtle over at www.lizchattertonstudio.co.uk.